Welcome to Frontiers of Brain Health. I feel like this is one of the happiest days of my life to get to introduce Dr. Alvaro Pascual-Leone. You will see why in a few minutes, but for those of you that don't know, we bring the top scientists from around the world that are doing discoveries that you don't hear about until you come here, as to what you can do, how you can measure it, and things that can be done. My name is Dr. Sandy Chapman. I'm the founder and chief director of the center and a professor in the School of Behavioral and Brain Science. For those of you that don't know, the Center for Brain Health, we've just celebrated our 25th year based on 3 decades of scientific discoveries. We're so grateful to each of you because you're contributing to that, whether it's addiction, multiple sclerosis, or I love seeing our middle school brain years program where we've reached 100,000 youth to show that when they use their brain in innovative ways, they actually can become who they want to be, as well as working with our military, CEOs. If every single person in the world will start to think about what can I do for my brain and come here for solutions, we'll be very excited about that. So you'll be glad you came today. If I gave you the whole biography of Alvaro, I would take up his whole talking time. He is a professor of neurology at the Harvard Medical School. He's a senior scientist at the Hinda and Arthur Marcus Institute for Aging Research and medical director of the Deanna Sidney Walk Center for Memory Health. I mean, it goes on and on. He is an international leader in the study and modulation of human cortical plasticity. Many people ask about TMS. This doctor is one of the ones who was the pioneer for us to discover that. And we should ask him what his story is because it's very interesting. He sees patients as a cognitive neurologist. He's a dementia specialist. And he has been around the world talking about the work that he does, but also he's just one of the most down-to-earth doctors that you'll ever meet. In addition to the contributions at Harvard, Dr. Pascual-Leone leads the Barcelona Brain Health Institute initiative that's a groundbreaking longitudinal study. And when I say what it does, it will sound a lot like our Brain Health Project, that he wants people to get ahead of it, to prevent brain aging, and to have their best brain years in their future rather than in their past. He has authored 900 scientific papers. He holds several patents, and he's been recognized as obviously one of the world's top neuroscientists. As if he didn't have enough to do, he is also the co-founder and chief medical officer of Linus Health. And after hearing what Linus Health does, I think healthcare places around the country are going to start adopting it to enable the detection of brain conditions well before you get in to see your physician. And he's very interested in empowering individuals about their brain health. Now you know why I love this guy. And he does fun things. I asked him what he and his wife did for fun, and he said, well, we just had 2 marriages, and so we took dancing lessons, salsa lessons, so that we could dance at the wedding. So not only is he brilliant, he's fun, and he's going to make a difference in the world. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alvaro Pascual-Leone.
Thank you. Thank you. This is why we need to be connected with good people and good friends. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a neurologist and a neurotechnologist, I guess, something like that you call it, a neuroscientist. Here, I want to talk to you about what I'm going to call the pit stop model of brain health care. These are my disclosures. You can read them, but Harvard sort of makes me tell you all this, so here it is. It's appropriate to do so. Now, what brings us all here, I think, is similar. I'll try to summarize it in one slide. Brain-related disability, not just dementia, all brain-related causes for disability are, according to the World Health Organization, a critical, maybe the critical threat for human society. We are, if you want to think about it that way, in a race for the welfare of humanity. And the reality is, we're losing. We can sugarcoat it, but we are losing. Right now, brain diseases are the #1 cause for human disability. Put together cardiovascular disease and cancer, brain diseases cause more disability than the two together. Right now, we're spending about 15% of the GDP to take care of people with brain-related disabilities. That's more than cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory disease combined. What is particularly worrisome to me is that health systems that invest more into brain diseases actually cause more disability. It's just the opposite of what we want to achieve. With extended lifespan, which is exciting, we live longer, which right now is buying us more disability. Of every extra year of life we get 9 months out of those 12 months of disability. We're doing everything right to make the problem worse, not to solve the problem. We're losing the race. So I want to make the argument that that doesn't need to be the outcome. That doesn't need to be our history. We're losing the race, but we can change the outcome. And you are on the same intention. And so what I like to do to make that argument is take you back to one very specific day and tell you a little bit of a story. That very specific day is the 4th of August of 1957. On the 4th of August of 1957, this fellow here, whose name is Juan Manuel Fangio, was sort of at the tail end of his career. He had won it all. He had won 23 Grand Prix. He had won 4 times in a row the Drivers' Championship. He was unbeatable. He had driven to success for different cars. On that very day, he was about to compete in the German Grand Prix at Nürburgring, except he was no longer the favorite, and he was not necessarily expected to win, contrary to his purpose. The reason why he was not expected to win was because he was 46, way older than the average driver, way older than what you expect to drive you to success in Formula One. And he was driving a Maserati, which had been a dominant car, but no longer really was. The Ferraris were better cars. And so he had to come up with something new, with some new strategy. And the new strategy was what at the time was nothing short of revolutionary. He decided to go out with half a tank of gasoline, not a full tank of gasoline, and with soft tires, which would never last the entire race, but are faster, particularly in curves, and the Nürburgring has a lot of curves. And so with this lighter than expected car, with these soft tires, he was able to come out very fast and gain in half the race 12 how do you call that? Tracks, 12 times around the track, I guess, laps, thank you. So 12 laps, in 12 laps, he was able to gain 30 seconds over the Ferraris. He was way ahead. And now came the kicker of the new strategy. He had to stop. He had to stop at the pit stop, which at the time was not done. He stopped. His mechanics got to work. They changed the tires to put new soft tires. They replenished his gasoline with, again, half a tank. It wasn't particularly well orchestrated. It took him a minute and a half of standing still to get that accomplished. When he came out, he was no longer leading. He was third. He was 48 seconds behind the Ferraris, but he had half a tank and soft tires. And he gunned it again. and was able to recover enough to win by 3 seconds, and he won the Nürburgring. And there are a number of lessons. One is you need to be a really darn good driver. All of us do. But the second is you need to be driven by a desire to do something, and he was. And the third, and the one I want to focus on, you need to pit stop at the right time. Not after the car breaks, but ahead of time, and optimize those pit stops. One of the people who were watching it, this guy, Glenn Wood, had with his brothers the Woods driving team, and they learned from it and orchestrated and planned ahead the pit stops very carefully, and using a substitute driver, the Wayne Tiny Lund, who was not expected to start for them, but the main driver was injured. So despite the fact that he was not Juan Manuel Fangio, the planned, orchestrated, well-choreographed pit stops led them to win against the all-powerful Ford team, the Daytona 500. So what's my take-home message? We can learn from car racing to win the race for brain health. So think about what has happened with pit stops in car racing. What has happened is that from Fangio's over 1 minute stop, we are now in about 2.4 second stops. And hundreds of seconds literally win or lose championships. It's about staying the most time possible on track, the least time possible in the pit stop. You don't want to be seeing me in clinic. You want to be living your life using technology to monitor that you're functioning well, just like we do with the cars, and telling us when, for how many milliseconds, and for what purpose to stop at the pit stop. That's the goal. If we're able to do that, we'll use medical resources better, we'll optimize our time enjoying life, and we will win the brain health race. It's not about lack of illness, it's about optimizing the functioning, whether or not you have illness for each individual person. Now, that's quite different from what we do today. Because what we do today, to start with, is to put the likes of me in the middle. We take care of diseases instead of taking care of people, leave alone their health. We, at some point, as individuals may or may not develop an illness, we wait until symptoms develop. We wait generally until family drives us nuts, and eventually are able to voice a complaint. Then we have a 4-cause assessment by our primary care physicians, which, if it's in the realm of brain, generally means that they don't know what to do, and therefore they either ignore it or wait, or at best refer you to a specialist like me. Except in Boston, where I practice, there are more neurologists than in the entire United Kingdom. In the entire United Kingdom, there are more neurologists than in all of Africa. And despite of those riches of numbers, in Boston it takes about 12 months to see a neurologist. Imagine in Africa. So once you get to see the neurologist, there is testing, diagnosis, treatment, and at that point, a good outcome is to promote brain-related disability. That's not the outcome any one of us wants, but that's the reality of it. Why? Because way too much time has passed. We've spent 10 years on average between illness onset and symptoms of complaint, about 3 to 6 months from complaint to seeing the PCP, 6 to 12 months from PCP to neurologist, 4 to 8 months from neurologist to disease, potentially modifying treatments. Overall, about 15 years since onset of illness until treatment is initiated. If you think just about the number of neurons you lose per year, you've lost billions of neurons. That's not good. So we need a different approach. Think Juan Manuel Fangio. We need a different framing. So what we've done thus far is wait until illness develops and symptoms, and then hopefully get to a diagnosis and treatment. And the outcome there, unfortunately, is disability promotion. But before illness, there is health. And if we had the way through annual physical exams or through remote assessments to characterize any one of us, we would be able to detect deviations of the individual trajectory in such a way that we would have an individual fingerprint deviation, which would allow us to track our health change before illness ever happens to predict risk of disease or likelihood of staying healthy. And if there is risk of disease, and therefore disability risk, with early detection could come early interventions. So that becomes a transformative sort of model that requires that sort of pit stop longitudinally, ideally lifelong. So the idea behind the pit stop model is let's put the person in the middle, not the patient. These are not patients, the person in the middle. Let's make sure that we plan when and how to do pit stops. We can start with annual wellness exams and then ultimately use technology to define when to come in to see who for what. Let's make that strategy to be adjustable. Adjustable by what? By whatever happens in life that may be unexpected. Let's anchor it with a primary care team, not a physician, but a team that has different focus of specialty. Let's consult a specialist if and when and only when it's necessary. And when we do that, we could stratify risk of a population, do population screening, empower individuals to track their brain health, empower them to define their goals of brain health, and equip them with the tools to be able to pursue them. A key element that we need for that is to actually have the tools to be able to make that possible. Just like in driving, racing, pit stops, we need the tools to monitor the state of the car. And so, what are tools that can allow us to do that? Well, traditionally, the functioning of the brain, at least for all main purposes, is measures of behavior. And measures of behavior traditionally have outcomes that are paper and pencil, like cognitive neuropsych testing. They're time intensive, they're not very sensitive, they're expensive. We call a lot of things pre-symptomatic because our tools are not sensitive enough to detect the symptoms. We've evolved those. We have digitized tests, which are cool looking, are nice. You can integrate them well into electronic records. But they're not a significant gain over paper and pencils. We can tell it differently, but that's the reality, because at the end of the day, they're measuring the same thing. And because they're measuring the same thing, they're failing to give a really sensitive measure of what is uniquely individual. So in other words, they don't capitalize on the power of digitalization to be able to measure the brain state of health. If I ask you to do a clock drawing task on paper, or I ask you to do that on a tablet, and at the end of the day I judge how that clock looks on paper or on the tablet, it's not changing the criteria of goodness that I apply. The idea behind what I just said is not new. In fact, the idea of what I just said comes from this lady here, who some of you will know, Edith Kaplan, working with Norman Geschwin in Boston, pointed out that the framework of neuropsych assessments that make them different is that you need to derive the insights from watching the person do what and how they do what they do. It's about observing carefully. And when you do that, you get a sense that goes beyond the end result. I know pretty much nothing about mechanics of cars, but I tell myself that by looking and listening to my mechanic tell me what is wrong with my car, I can get a sense of whether he or she knows what the heck they're talking about. And why? Because the process by which you go about doing what you do matters. And that's what Edith was pointing out and called it the Boston process approach. Except that requires a lot of training, a lot of observation, attention. It's time-consuming and expensive. Now imagine using technology to capture the way you go about doing what you do, using machine learning and AI-enabled assessments to be able to analyze it. Arguably, it could do process metrics better than any one of us can, because it's capturing absolutely everything that you do. So that's the idea behind these third-generation cognitive assessments, capitalizing on the power of technology to get more sensitive measures. Let me give you an example. Let's use traditional measures, a MoCA test or an MMSE, and you get a given score. I've spent a lot of time trying to convince students that if you have a score of 27 out of 30, and it's quote normal, for me, it'd be not normal. It depends on where I lost those points. If I don't know the date, well, that's sort of my baseline, so that's not particularly surprising. But if I cannot remember 3 out of 5 words that I encoded, that's not normal. Not for me. And I know that's not normal, even though you will call it normal because you give me 27 out of 30 points, unless you're a good neuropsychologist and unpack it, and anyway, you get the idea. These two people both had, quote, normal scores. These two people both drew good clocks. And so they got 3 out of 3 points on both. We can start arguing, neuropsychologists, we love this, cognitive neuroscientists, the hands in the top one are different length, the hands in the bottom ones are not different lengths. We should really point differently that fact, whatever. The net result is that it's not obvious the difference, but if you use process metrics, if you capture how I hold the stylus, how I drew, what pauses, what hesitations, if I do all that, I can generate 15,000 measures if I want to, and I can focus on the top 1,500 and generate machine learning algorithms that gives me on the top an 88 out of 100 points, on the bottom a 54 out of 100 points, and that clearly separates these two groups on account of specific things, in this case, drawing efficiency and processing speed, the results of which is that the person on the top has truly no cognitive impairment. The person on the bottom has MCI due to AD. Why have we gotten to that? Because we have very high sampling, a fraction of the time, and because we can apply multiplexing analysis to use the same metrics to tell and predict different things, cognitive impairment, function, Alzheimer's disease, pathology or not. More to that in a second. So it becomes a very quick process-based diagnostic assessment. Now, we don't need to only capture the drawing process. We can capture anything we can use technology to do, and we can use all those measures in the same algorithm. And when you do that, you can generate with the same assessment different algorithms. So for example, we can use the microphone, cameras, tactile screen, the inertia sort of metrics of the MOU of the phone, and we can generate different engines that predict cognitive function, functional assessment, likelihood of depression, risk of dementia development, or presence of amyloid in the brain. Now, do we have evidence that that works? We do. Actually, we have from the Framingham Heart Study, from Leahy Clinic, from RASH cohorts, we have followed tenths of thousands of people, and we can show that with the same clock drawing task I showed you as an example, multiplexing predictors, we can show a very good predictive value on functional impairment classification. We can show a remarkably good prediction of risk of dementia in the next 5 years. We can predict the cognitive impairment as well as any other cognitive assessment or better, and we can at the same time predict with as good fiability, sensitivity, and specificity as plasma biomarkers, the presence of amyloid in the brain. Now, each one of these predictions are different, quote, engines, are different alignments of the same metrics or of slightly different metrics, but captured in the same moment. They're trying to do what a clinician would try to do, but with data rather than with qualitative impressions. Now, the nice thing about that is that once you have that, you can link it to specific actionable recommendations that can go to the clinician or can go to the patient or their caregivers. You can give rise to a specific brain health action plan for people to be reassured that they're doing well, but what they should do to remain that way, just like in the pit stop metaphor that I'm using, you would do with the driver. There's a number of metrics that you can derive from different tools, different assessments, including completely remote assessments that are based on speech only. The way I think about it very simplistically is I come into my house after a day of work and it's been a great day, and I say, "Hi, Lee, I'm home." Lee's my wife. Or I come home after a particularly crappy day, and I say, "Hi, Lee, I'm home." And I say the same thing every day because I've gotten used to saying the same thing. But my wife's response is, "What happened?" In the second case, "Oh, what happened that was so great?" in the first case. And I go, "How do you know?" And the answer is, I know you. There's something different in your voice when you had a good day versus when you didn't. And we all know this. Clinicians, good clinicians, can judge that qualitatively. Think about art of medicine. Hippocrates used to tell his students, remember, this is the father of the science of medicine. He used to tell people, if you want to help the person, and you need to decide on learning about the disease versus learning about the person who has the disease, always choose the latter. Choose to learn about the person who has the disease, and you'll help the illness. In medicine, we sort of have lost that, but in neurotechnology and technologies, we can capture that by capturing the voice in such a way that you have, again, a fingerprint of Alvaro that says, oh, his latencies, his cadence, his prosody, his gaps have changed, something is off. So we can do that fully remotely, and again, link it to specific results and specific reports facing the clinician or facing the patient. And provide along the lines of that decision support for primary care physician. We can empower primary care providers in the hands of their technicians to get an assessment that is equivalent or better than what a specialist would do. We can shift the pit stop to the right time, much like what we've done with hypertension. Most people with hypertension don't see a specialized cardiologist, or diabetes. Most people don't see an endocrinologist, but with brain diseases in general, we haven't done that, and so we need to do that. Ideally, we need to do it not just with the diagnostics, but with a wraparound care that goes from detection to actually implement the potential solutions. That's what Linus is trying to do. But I want to spend a little bit of time at the end talking about what can we do when we do that, and give you an example of some of those things, shifting the focus from diagnostic to think about therapeutics. And for that, I want us to think about that behavior, those behavior measures that we're capturing, what are they really a manifestation of? They're a manifestation of really an interaction between a healthy brain structure, whatever the heck that is, and a healthy brain function, whatever the hell that is. But the result of those two things is that for every one thing you want to think about, me giving you this talk, you listening, us eating, whatever it is, there is a spatiotemporal signature that is a manifestation of an ensemble of neurons working together to enable that emotion, thought, behavior, whatever. That's a functional unit of a normal functioning brain. Those networks, those ensembles have characteristics of plasticity, of dynamic adjustment, all this kind of stuff. But if that is the case, what is lack of health? Lack of health, disease, is a stressor, an injury, an insult, whatever process altering either the structure or the function, sort of doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the net result is that it alters spatiotemporal signatures, giving rise to symptoms. And so therefore, there is an altered spatiotemporal signature of my slow processing speed, or my unsteady gait, or my memory problems, or my not finding the word lap when I was trying to come up with that a moment ago. The cause for which could be many things: sleep deprivation, hopefully in my case, or Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't matter. The net result is that there is an alteration of spatiotemporal signatures that map onto those symptoms, and we can think of illnesses as causing circuit disorders, circuitopathies, but particularly cool then, we can think of a controlled perturbation of the brain, like Delphi tries to do, or others, to measure whether, if you do that, you can elicit, measure, quantify that alteration. And what I'm trying to tell you and show you about is that in doing that, we can go beyond diagnostics. We can ask the question, can we, by perturbing in a controlled way, impact the symptoms, establish a causality then between altered spatiotemporal signatures and symptoms? And in doing so, in forcing the brain to work normally, could we have not just a symptomatic effect, but a disease-modifying effect upstream? I know it sounds science fiction, but what the hell. So how good are these perturbation biomarkers? So it turns out, Recep Özdemir has studied this carefully. We have a number of publications. You can get a very controlled, very targeted, very reliably consistent perturbation transcranially of the activity of the brain. Individuals, if you target one location and look at different individuals, we're all very different, so therefore very different measures. But if you target more than 4 locations, you characterize the dynamics of the brain to the perturbation, and that becomes, in a population, very variable, but for an individual, exceedingly consistent. So we can identify the Alvaro-ness of Alvaro's response to perturbations. We can get a fingerprint of individual responses with these perturbation biomarkers. And if you have that, by looking longitudinally, you can say something changed. The perturbation is now changing. The response is still normal, but it's different than what it typically is in Alvaro. It could be because of sleep deprivation of Alzheimer's. Let's unpack it. But it is a different response to the perturbation. And if you have that, and if you have the type of spatiotemporal signature that maps onto a certain symptom, then you can generate a model-driven intervention to normalize that spatiotemporal signature. And when you have that, you can send the person home with a non-invasive approach to keep that entrainment going in such a way that you have a therapeutic, home-based therapeutic intervention to try to see if by inducing that change, you can go beyond the acute, leverage plasticity mechanisms to establish a new reality. So let me show you a concrete example of that. Imagine the task at hand has to do with episodic memory, and we've established with these biomarkers of behavior that these people are not having good episodic memory. And imagine that we capture the brain activity associated with it, and that gives us a spatiotemporal signature of episodic memory or its alteration. What you see here are older, healthy participants with normal episodic memory. These are 256 EEG channels all collapsed to show basically a very different signature, doesn't matter the details, than what we get in individuals with Alzheimer's disease who have the beginning of episodic memory dysfunction. If we do a topographic map of it, it shows a hotspot of alteration in a particular part of the brain, angular gyrus. We can generate a montage of electrodes that optimizes the current flow in that area. And when we do that and induce the, quote, normalization of the spatiotemporal signature, this is an example of one person. You have somebody who over the course of 2.5 years has gone from having a memory index score of 15 out of 15 to having a memory index score of 0. That translates in activities of daily living, in normal life. In the case of this person, it translates into the following situation. He still plays golf. His wife takes him to the golf course. He comes, he gets out of the car, perfectly normal. He goes, he plays golf, perfectly normal. The friends that he plays with have to take him back to the pickup point because he wouldn't be able to find it. When his wife picks him up and asks, how'd it go? He says, great. What did you do? I don't know. Why don't you ask them? We played golf. We played golf. Was it fun? It was fun. How did you do? How did I do? Not good. Not good. What was your score? What was my score? Did you stop for lunch? Did we stop for lunch? You know this. I mean, you've seen these people. So there is no awareness of the deficit, but there is profound deficit. That's where he is at the baseline here, 0 out of 15 in a memory index with restoration of that signature of activity, or with the attempt to do so. His memory index recovers, and with that, he knows who he plays golf with, how many holes did they play, what his score was, what they had for lunch. Dramatic change. Not everybody has that dramatic a response, but it's variable. But overall, compared to sham, there is a very clear benefit, and that clear benefit is directly related to a change in that brain activity, a restoration of that spatiotemporal signature that very highly predicts the likelihood of response. The more modification, the more restoration you induce, the more symptomatic improvement there is, establishing the causality relationship between the spatiotemporal signature abnormality and the symptoms. But to me, the most exciting thing is that if you look upstream of that abnormality, if you look at the amyloid deposition, if you look at the tau deposition, if you look at perfusion changes, these are tiny, tiny, tiny studies, so take them with a humongous grain of salt, please. But the exciting thing is that in these tiny studies, we're seeing an effect with a reduction of tau, with a reduction of amyloid deposition, which is, to me, unheard of and quite exciting. So is it possible that we may be able to modify the symptoms? It seems to be yes. Is it possible that by modifying the spatiotemporal signatures, we may prevent the symptoms and reduce the pathology? I think that's the exciting thing. So not wait until the symptoms, even for the interventions. And we have the tools, remember, to detect the potential abnormality before it develops. The way I think about it is we have the tools in the pit stop model to monitor the driver progress, how fast the car is going, and the state of the motor at the same time with these tools. So what I've tried to tell you is that we can learn lessons from car racing to win the race for brain health. It requires planning pit stops by having the right tools to assessing at different time points across the life how people are functioning. It requires not just measuring how fast the car is going, as it were, but also the driving style, to detect changes in the driving style, and how much gasoline, how much oil, and so forth is being consumed, looking under the hood of the car with tools like EEG and so on. It requires, in order to do that, process metrics, not just digitize things. Ideally, it should leverage the empowerment of individuals by asking each of us, what do you want a healthy brain for? Because that answer sort of matters. If I want to continue to play soccer, the things I need in my brain are very different than if I want to continue to give lectures or if I want to invent new stuff. Patient-centered outcome measures are a way to enable that, and tools that capture, like Epson, patient-centered outcome measures become very powerful for that purpose. Beyond the behavior measures, we want to identify, perhaps with perturbation biomarkers, what is the underlying brain biology supporting that change in behavior or that sustaining of behavior, looking longitudinally for early detection and interventions. And at the end of the day, enabling primary care providers to actually do for us what they are doing for any number of chronic illnesses. In the case of the brain, not wait until symptoms develop when it's too late, but rather maintain us in health to minimize the risk of those diseases to develop to begin with. Thank you.
Wow, really fascinating. I know there's going to be a room full of questions. I'm going to start off. I get to do this. So everyone would be raising their hand, right? If that could work for MCI, right, Audette? If that could work. So were those people on any medications? Were they changing any lifestyle, or how did you get those kind of results? And when you said it's tiny, is that like 1 or 10 or 5? What's tiny?
Oh, in the upstream effect on the amyloid? Yeah, that's an N of 5. So that's a really tiny study. It's a proof of principle study.
But amazing. Yeah.
So we need a lot bigger. I mean, we need an appropriately controlled.
And that doesn't have to get approved, right? Because TAC, I mean, the work that you're doing, that treatment has already been approved, so it could be easy to do. You don't have to wait for any different approval for that for Alzheimer's.
Yeah, so you can apply it off-label. Some of these applications, the tool that we've used is in the setting of research, and the devices that one could use off-label are not as sophisticated as the one we're using. The basic
no surprise
difference
is that you've got the most sophisticated.
No. The basic difference is that if you want to create a field that is very specific to any one spatiotemporal abnormality, you want multiple electrodes to interact, and for that you need multiple channels. And these multi-channels devices are not approved for anything, so you can only use them right now under IRB appropriately, so I think that's appropriate. The company that we use the device of is in the process of an FDA approval, so once it's approved for something, we can use it for Alzheimer's, but not yet.
Okay, it's open to questions. Dr. Gamino.
I love your pit stop theory or analogy.
Thank you.
Are you able to convince medical schools to adopt this theory?
I don't know. Time will tell. It makes sense to me. So, the idea, I mean, it's a different term. The term, actually, I'll confess, I was trying to explain to my youngest son, who's finishing medical school, but I was trying to explain what we were doing, and he said, oh, well, that's pit stop models. And I said, what the hell is that? He's a big Formula One fan. I knew nothing about it. So the credit should go to him. But I think it makes it concrete. But in the US,
I want to read this chapter and make sure it doesn't go to Alzheimer's first.
It
On brain
didn't.
health, that it really does brain health. What age is wellness covered under Medicare? Is it just for older people?
Yeah, it's just after Medicare eligibility, so 65
So it's
or
not
older. Yeah.
covered. So insurance doesn't cover it for a 20-year-old.
No.
Wellness for the brain.
No.
Okay.
You need a for-cause, but the for-cause right now trick can be as simple as to say, Sandy, tell me, are you worried about your
Thank you.
And that's
brain?
it.
Yes. Okay, we have a for-cause assessment.
Okay. I've got the lingo now.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. The question was just asked about Medicare. Obviously, we're living in unusual times now, and so there's so many cutbacks and so many ungrants instead of grants being offered. And Medicare does not cover unless you've got kidney problems. They don't cover people who are younger or disabled people. Mm-hmm. So you would have to deal with private insurance companies who don't necessarily always approve programs like this. Mm-hmm. But what is the age that you consider the most appropriate for starting the kind of services that you're talking about? And I do think IRBs are going to have to approve the research, whether they have not in the past in some of these things.
Yeah, thank you for all that. There's a lot there. I think that in a real kind of sense, the emphasis on lifestyles making a difference that we're hearing a lot of actually is both accurate and aligned with some of these findings. So it's about being more holistic in the prescription of things. We generally have come to recognize that it matters what you do, and oftentimes physicians tell you, you should sleep enough, eat the right thing, and my grandmother used to tell me that too, but that's not generally what we call medicine, right? That's what we call good advice. And so how can we make those lifestyle modifications prescriptions? We don't tell people you should take some medication for your epilepsy. We tell them what, how much. And so we need to get to the same level at lifestyles. And I think that the realization that is needed is there, broadly speaking. So I think that some of that work is going to continue. I think the kind of recommendations and how to engage and how to promote adherence is very different for 80, 60-year-olds or for 20-year-olds. And yet the importance of it is increasingly clear. So you look at the Lancet report for dementia, forgive me for using that example, but the BMI at middle age ends up being a predictor of the risk of dementia. So obesity in middle age, not at 80, when you were 40. Now, Who knew? Well, I mean, longitudinal studies have been showing some of these predictions for a while. So to your point, we need to start identifying the point of interaction. How is that going to be covered by insurance? Demonstrating that that translates into savings for the health systems.
Brainomics. Our word is brainomics for that.
And that it relates to better productivity at work. And I don't agree that they don't care. I think they care. So, for example, right now in the United States, the #1 most common reason to visit the emergency room is cognitive problems. That's nuts. Right? Those are the patients who should never go to an emergency room. Why are they going to the emergency room? Because people don't know what to do, and because there is no plan ahead for that pit stop model to take place and decide when to stop. So I think it just requires a different kind of research that captures some of the economical impact of some of these things. So anyway, it's no doubt a complicated set of challenges, but I think it's an important one to tackle.
Alvaro, we have a question from our online audience. Do the Linus digital brain health tests for MCI or Alzheimer's take into account whether a person taking them has pre-existing dyscalculia, dyslexia, or language processing disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, if you have some developmental disorders or acquired issues, you're going to perform differently. And I think that point that I was trying to make is that the most sensitivity in these metrics, in this kind of metrics, comes from within subject deviations of their trajectories. And so if you have dyscalculia, you'll perform differently to begin with, or if you have dysarthria, you'll perform differently. But unless there is a change to that performance, you will have your own signature. So I think that at a cross-sectional level, it's only going to detect you look different. The way I often tell it to people, you've heard me about this before, is I'm 5'11", nothing good or bad about it. My hands should be the appropriate size for a 5'11" guy. If they were too small, I probably always knew. So in this case, if I perform funky and something is off because I have dysarthria, I probably always knew that my articulation is funny. I'm told I have an accent, for example. So that's going to impact my performance, right? So even though I'm not aware of some of these things, I sort of know. And so I think we capture that to the question, and we take that into consideration in the recommendations for the clinicians to make the inferences. But most importantly, we look at within subject change as a most sensitive predictor.
And that's one area, Alvaro, that we both stress is longitudinal studies and why people need annually to get testing, because it's you against you. It's not you against the norm as to what's changed. And I loved your example of when you come in the house, someone knows it. It's following people that we see it, that our norms, I mean, Jan and I, working with peak performers, they always say I was tested and they said I'm normal. Well, I'm not me. I am not my normal.
Yeah, exactly.
But I reach in there. So I really appreciate this idea that our tests are not meant to just do this once point in time and then say what's right or wrong. It's the change that we're looking for.
And the beauty of those within subject metrics of process, of performance, is that just like the example of my wife detecting it, you can oversample by design. So you don't need to do once every 3 months. You can do every day the evaluation if you want. And yeah, there will be fluctuation, and some of it will be a one meaning or another. That doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's your trajectory that matters, and that's what approach we've been taking.
So tell us, you said, and Dr. Finezzo, this is for you, hearing, that you measure hearing on this digital, how does it measure hearing?
Yeah, so basically we give auditory prompts. Say in the example I was giving, we tell you 3 words. It's a sort of digitized mini-cog. So we give you 3 words, you repeat them. So that repetition whether you repeat them correctly or not, there's a heavy attentional component, but there's a potentially heavy listening, hearing component. So we can use that initial response to flag the possibility that hearing may not be normal. And if so, it triggers an auditory assessment that is not pure tones, but is actually voice, and by design, on purpose, to have a more functional evaluation at the end, to be able to tell people you should be seeing an audiologist or not. That we don't mean to replace the audiology assessments, but which should happen every year, at least in older individuals, but simply to identify the potential need for it.
So I'm going to put you on,
And
there's another question, but I'm going to put you on the spot while this question's coming up. Well, no, I'll let the question go, and then I'll put you on the spot. Sarah?
I'm hearing this push and pull, right? We really holistic and affecting brain health, but at the same time, we want it to be something accessible that people can take more frequently if they need to. So I'm curious, how long does it take to do recovery? And are there certain areas of assessment that seem to be more telling about somebody's brain health over time that we can focus on?
Thank you. Sorry about that. So what are the best predictors, if there are any specific predictors? We need longer longitudinal follow-up of many people. I have the feeling that the answer is going to be there is not one, but rather it depends on the individual and what they want to do. But time will tell, and data will tell. And so until that time, we've tried to capture in a very short time, I'll tell you how long, as much information as possible. There is a regulatory hurdle to this, which is we have set it up as medical devices for the most part, and so in order to offer medical devices, you need an FDA regulatory process. So if you add other components to it, that becomes starting de novo. So we can capture more things than we right now are using, and we are capturing more things and making it available for research than we're using clinically. That said, what we do for the process metrics, for example, for the clock drawing test, that's 2.5 minutes total time of an assessment, and in the first half a minute or so, we have all the information we need, really, because of the process metrics. So it's very quick. The longest assessment is remote voice-based assessment that includes several components. It's less than 8 minutes long in terms of the actual duration of performance by people of all ages and degrees of function. So it's very quick, but capturing so much information that you can extract a lot of information.
So I love that you said that it may not be one thing and different for different people, because it is, the brain health is multidimensional. So thanks for pointing that. So my question, to put you on the spot, is, as you can imagine, the next 2 years, what would you be most excited about in terms of working with the Center for Brain Health and the science that's going on here in your work? What would you see as being like, that would be exciting?
I mean, I think that there are very few places that have seriously set up an infrastructure and a commitment to do lifelong brain health programming, right? And this is one, if not the one. That's super exciting, with the awareness of the translation, not just for the patients, but for society, productivity and so forth. So being part of some of these tools being used in that setting, to learn from that, to add to what you're trying to do, to, I'll tell you, the Linus Health, so the mission statement is to put brain health in its rightful place in the global effort of care. So that's essentially the same mission in a different set of words. So to work together would be great. On a research side, I really believe that these non-invasive strategies to modify brain can translate into better performance, into greater resilience, into prevention of disability. And those are super early days. And so to partner with some of the things we're trying to do academically that I mentioned at the end, through the Walk Center, through the Marcus Institute, develop tools to help each individual become the very best version of themselves by modifying those activities in a very direct, neurobiologically driven way. I don't think that's science fiction anymore, and I don't think that it's also something to be necessarily just afraid of, because it's going to come. The question becomes, how do you regulate it, including ethically regulate it, to make the most out of it. But,
How do we ethically regulate people, you but better, year by year? I think we can do it. I'm so excited, Alvaro. Thank you. That was wonderful closing. This amazing doctor, can you believe he's here? He was in Madrid when the power went off.
It wasn't my fault. It was not my fault.
But he made it here a day late, and wow, we are so lucky. This is why this is one of the happiest days of my life, to be able to host you and that you made it, and I can hardly wait to see what happens as a result of this. Please
Thank you
join
so
me
much.
in giving a big round of applause for Dr. Alvaro Pascual-Leone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And so, Cecilia, do you want to announce about our Brain Health Presents?
Everyone who registered to be part of the Frontier series should have gotten a reminder yesterday, I think, about our Presents series. It's our night series talks that are a little different from this, or a little bit more formal. There's a wonderful reception, and we have shared a code for everyone who comes to our Frontier series to come for free. So just check your email. Just to this one. Usually people have to register and pay for the whole 4 talk series, but you have an extended invitation to come for free, and we hope to see you guys there.
Thank you. This is our last Frontiers of the season, unless we surprise you and do a pop one, which we're known to do. So we will see you in September. What a great way to end it with such an amazing finale. Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you so much. And do our sleep challenge, text challenge. Alvaro, pull out your phone. I want you to do it. I want you to do this. You can either do the QR code. Oh, no, it's not on there. Oh, there it is. Or you can type the number 888. Oh, well, you can do the QR code. And if you haven't done it, come on, do it. Join us. Every day you will get a sleep text tip from Dr. Matt Walker and from our team, and the science behind it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear your feedback on it. It will be fun. Oh, good. Yay. You're in. Thank you all for coming. Incredible, incredible talk.